So this is my full review of the 2024 Mtn.Top XFR 126 3¼ inch kit. I've had 7 rides now, so I've got a pretty good feel for it, but there's so much nuance with this stuff that I'm sure there's still a lot to learn. I've only had 2 full seasons of riding a 2018 Timbersled Raw 120 with a Cordova Power Sports conversion to a 129 3-inch, but I get to ride quite a bit since I live 5 minutes from the trailhead, and I can go out and be back in just a few hours. So starting from the beginning, when I got the kit, it already had some scratches on the top plate, which was pretty annoying for me. I don't have a ton of money, and this kit is the most expensive thing I own. When I pulled it out of the box, it seemed to be a comparable weight to my old kit, just going by feel. The Wild Alaskan was surprised to find out that the top of the line Fox shocks don't come with an O-ring to measure the stroke, but rather we have to use zip ties. Assembly wasn't bad, but I'm not sure if I got a bad spec on the strut rod length because the back end was really low to the point that my left number plate hit the case chain once. And in my first impressions video, I talked about how squirrely it was turning, and I thought it was just the extreme maneuverability, but now I think it was partly because the strut rod was just too short. I adjusted it 2 full revolutions out and it seems much better. The ski has less troughs to catch snow, which is much better. I do my own customization, filling the holes with foam and flex sealing them over, but I'd like to see a production ski with those capped over so they're not always catching snow that turns to water and ice. But the Wild Alaskan says it's hard to make those holes capped off for some reason. The chain tightening systems were a bit overwhelming coming from the simplicity of the Raw, but after getting the right tool and adjusting enough times, it's not that big of a deal. One thing that was surprising to me is that the track sticks way out in front of the side plates and your right heel can easily get into the track. Maybe it's because I've been so used to riding on my heels with the old kit that was too wide, but when I'd twist my toes out and my heels in, I was hitting the track, scuffing my nice new white Tech 7s, and I even ripped up the bottom of my pants, even though they were pretty baggy snowboard pants. So it seems like that could be fixed by making the front of the side plates out even with the paddles, but I don't know if there's reason why they didn't do that. I did do a video on how I swapped out most of the steel nuts and bolts for titanium and saved £1 and added some bling. And so, like in my first impressions video, it really is nice the way it rides and turns. It's much more dirt bikey, with easier turning by leaning instead of muscling the ski, and also with a lighter front end. These are my 2 biggest dreams that have now come true. So I think the narrow rails are the primary reason for the maneuverability, as well as the slightly shorter length. Also, it seems like the ski skeg design might help with that, and maybe the suspension and strut rod connection also. And all that, plus the live keel flex and the side skeg design seem to really help on the hard surfaces. So all that makes the bike much easier to ride, which is really helpful against fatigue and in tight spots. The track really does its job in the deep snow, and I was really impressed when I got into situations where I needed to climb out on a steep face from a slow speed in deep snow with no base. Originally, I was not going to test adjusting the shocks to further lighten the ski pressure riot style, but after extending my strut rod, I felt like there was room to experiment with that. And so on my last 2 rides, I added 10 psi to the front shock and decreased 10 psi from the rear from the recommended settings for my weight. It was immediately like a dream come true, bouncing around with such a light front end, and it is great for playful situations. But there are some drawbacks. It's easy to get bounced around too much, especially going up curvy single-track trails, and it will tend to trench more like that. But the bigger issue for me is jumping. It's kind of like pogo sticking around, and when you're not perfectly centered off of a jump, it can kick you in any direction. Shannon Mason mentioned this on Snowbike Nation not too long ago, and I think it is good advice not to try big jumps with that setting. I'll be sticking with the recommended settings myself since jumping is my priority. And I haven't tried adjusting the limiter strap, but I definitely want to for certain technical steep and deep climbs. But I usually ride by myself, and I don't really see how to adjust that without someone to hold the back end down. Another thing I should say is that it's a strong kit. I hang the track by strapping the tunnel handles up to the rafters, and I screwed up and started towing my bike trailer out of the garage without unstrapping that. It yanked tight and broke a steel strap hook from the front and one of the steel eye bolts on my trailer. But the bike and kit was totally fine, so praise God for that. And so really, I'm totally satisfied with everything with the Mtn.Top. I also feel like I want to say something about the suspension system and geometry that maybe I don't fully understand, not having ridden any other modern kits. But it just really feels good and efficient in all areas of riding. climbing, turning, jumping, and getting in and out of tight spots. And so that's really all I can think of to report now. I'm so grateful to God that I was able to afford to update myself to the modern era of snow bike kits. Maybe next I can get a new bike at some point. Praise God for all things good and His amazing creation, and may He bless us all with understanding of His spiritual truths more than we understand simple physical truths.